My word. A panel game devised by Tony Shrine and Edward J. Mason. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir challenge Anne Scott James and Denis Norden in a game about words, with Jack Longland in the chair.
And we go straight into the first round, which tests their vocabulary. For 2 marks, can you tell me the meaning of the following words? Beginning with Denis Norden. Denis, yours is Animadvert.
Animadvert. It sounds like one of those commercials with those chimpanzees, doesn't it? Animadvert is one of those words like vouchsafe, which is used as a kind of elegant variation of said. Mm-hmm. I've always understood it to mean he animadverted upon, so he held forth upon it, but with a touch of rebuke.
Yep, I think that's the best portmanteau description of that word that I've heard. It can, absolutely right, in 2 marks. It can mean just to observe, it can mean just to take cognizance of. It more usually has the meaning to comment critically on something or to censure it in some way or the other. 2 marks. Dilys Powell, yours is Nepenthe, which I better spell. Nepenthe, Nepenthe.
Well, it has the feeling of tranquility.
Yes.
It tranquilizes.
And
it's classical.
It's classical, very,
it's classical.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it a stream or a river which you crossed or drank? Or
drank.
You drank it.
That'll do.
You drank the river and you felt extremely tranquil.
That's right. This is a 5th century BC tranquilizer, a drink, or I think it could be a drug, with a sedative kind, one that can banish grief or trouble from the mind. In fact, the Greek means not grief, which is the opposite of being grief. 2 marks. And on to Frank Muir. Frank, and this suits you terribly well, yours is a growlery. Growlery, growlery.
It's a muse or early gathering place for a certain type of Victorian horse-drawn taxicab.
That would be a possibility, but I want...
A possibility will do me, Jack.
No, well, it won't give you 2 marks.
It sounds jocular, doesn't it?
It is, yes, it is jocular.
Growlery, is it sort of House of Lords?
It could be a very small corner of the House of Lords where a disgruntled peer could sit by himself.
Oh, the loo.
No comment. If you think of the opposite of a boudoir.
A boudoir is a powdery.
Yes.
So a growlery is still a den. A den, his den. It's a lord's den. Or Dennis.
I think you get 1.5 because I gave quite a lot of help. It's a small sitting room or den for the male of the species to retire to, just as a female with the vapours can retire to her boudoir, and that's why it was called a growlery. Anne Scott James, your word is a long one, dendrochronology.
Well, those long words are usually easier than the short ones, I think. It means the sounds of telling the age of trees.
Yes, in the first instance.
Which you could do by slicing them across, and then you count the number of rings they were, and if there were 50 rings, it would be 50 years old. Because most trees grow a new layer of bark every year.
Yes, I think that'll do. It has had a much more specialised sense, and I'm not going to deduct any marks. If you found a very ancient tree, or the remains of it, say, in an equally, or we hope, equally ancient temple, you can date the temple from counting the rings on the tree. And this is so that dendrochronology normally now means the fixing of dates in the past by comparative study of the annual growth of rings in a conveniently adjacent tree.
They used to say you could tell the age of a dowager duchess by the same principle.
cutting a tree down there.
Well, before we go on to the next round, here are the quotations you've been given for the last round of all, and for Denis Norden, yours is, "People who need people are the luckiest people in the world."
He's not going to sing, is he?
I think so. Good luck. And yours, Frank Muir, is "The girl I left behind me." Well, now we have a round of elementary explanations. How would you explain or describe these to a newly arrived English-speaking visitor who came from outer space? And Denis Norden, what you've got to explain to this creature, with however many legs, is aftershave lotion.
I mean, they don't have aftershave lotion. Outer space are technologically advanced people who can get... I would explain. I'd say, cross your legs for a moment. And the other three. Yeah. That aftershave lotion is a liquid. It was an American invention that was invented in order to give some point to having invented Father's Day. In fact, it's very doubtful whether it would actually exist unless it were for Father's Day and Christmas. And you apply it to your face after you've mowed it. And if you go around any suburb, there is a kind of morning ritual incantation by which it manifests itself, which goes something like...
2 marks. The visitor from Mercury is now completely satisfied. And we go on to Liz Powell. And what you have to explain to him or another is jealousy.
Well, can I do it in terms of a conversation?
Sure.
Difficult to explain to a green-eyed monster. Tactfully.
Good evening. I'm afraid I'm a stranger here myself. I don't know where it is. Oh, you want to know what it means? Oh, shut up, Fido. Be quiet. He's a nice gentleman. He's wearing an aerial on his head, apparently. My dog doesn't like you very much. You see, my dog suffers from jealousy. My dog doesn't like me to speak to anybody but me. That's all right, Dad. That's all right, Dad. No, be quiet. All right, yes, John, I am coming. I know I'm late for lunch. I won't be more than a minute or two. Excuse me, sir, I'm so sorry. You see, that is my husband, and he doesn't like me talking to people with horns on their heads. And therefore, that is what jealousy is, that your husband does not like you to talk to gentlemen who wear aerials instead of hats.
That's such a splendid bit of dramatic invention. I'm going to mark it 3 marks out of 2. And now, Frank Muir. Frank, yours is perhaps simpler to you. A joke.
A joke? You get a lot of creatures from outer space in television studio audiences, and it might be an idea, actually, to explain what a joke is. A joke is a story or an account of an occurrence or conversation, normally, expressed in such words or revealing such ludicrous circumstances or such odd characterizations that in the human being it triggers off certain muscles in the face and then in the respiratory system that produces a honking noise, which is called laughter. If it doesn't produce the honking noise called laughter, your account of this occurrence is called a boring anecdote. If it does inculcate laughter, it's called a joke.
Well, can't beat that from that master of the joke, Frank Muir. 2 marks straight away. And Scott James, yours is perhaps a little more difficult. A hiccup.
Well, you chaps, I expect that on your way in your rocket from Mars to Earth, you may have encountered a certain amount of turbulence. Air pockets and that sort of thing. Now, imagine an air pocket in the body. A sort of bubble of air between 2 ham sandwiches eaten too fast. In trying to escape, the air makes a kind of honking noise, just like the laughter which Frank's jokes produced. A sort of series of popping noises. Hic, hic, hic. That's known as hiccups.
Very succinct description. 2 marks. Well, after that bit of nonsense, we come on to a quick round of Latin cliches. For 2 marks, can you translate into English these rather overused Latinisms, which at once puts me into great difficulty.
You never get that on Radio 1. A quick round of Latin cliches. One Radio 1.
That's right. But I don't know whether to use the old or the new pronunciations. I'd better use both. This finds me in great difficulties. Denis Norden, yours is, in my pronunciation, Deus ex machina, or it might be in yours, Deus ex machina.
Never, don't.
Oh.
No, we never did that. Deus ex machina is the god out of the machine, because the old Greek theatres used to have these machines above them where they lowered gods down. It's a kind of plot device whereby you arbitrarily solve all the characters' difficulties by the intervention of an outside character or person or thing which hasn't been mentioned before. Like just 3 minutes before the last act, your heroine suddenly finds behind the bookcase a piece of paper that tells her she's actually the long-lost daughter of the Countess of Maltravers and the rightful heiress to Maltravers Manor.
Exactly. It's as Dennis quite right today, it's when humans get themselves into such a hopeless tangle that a god of some kind has to descend to sort things out.
That kind of solving of the plot at the last moment. In the late 18th century, there was an actor called Mr. Thornton, who was notorious for retrieving himself from utter disaster at the last moment. And there was a play he was in I can't remember that, by Byrom. And he, everything depended on him handing over the letter and then dying. And they opened the letter and all was revealed. And one night, Mr. Thornton at Windsor died without handing over the letter. And the cast stood round him when he wanted to do it, and they whispered, "Mr. Thornton, the letter. The letter, Mr. Thornton." Whereupon Mr. Thornton rose briskly and said, "Owing to a multiplicity of business, I had forgot to give you this." And he lay down and died, Mark II.
Deus not from the machine. Dilys Powell, yours is the next turn. Yours is integer vitae, or if you prefer it, integer vitae. I don't mind.
Well, it means whole of life, doesn't it? I mean, sort of complete of life. Integer vitae scelerusque puris.
That's right. But a little more moral sense, if I may have it, Dilys.
Yes. It's a reflection on an extremely moral character.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Pure of life and free of crimes.
Absolutely right.
I'm glad to say.
Yes, this is Horace in his most sententious. He said, blameless in life and clear of offence, and you get 2 marks. Frank Muir, and this is very difficult to say in either pronunciation.
Even worse in mine.
Eheu Fugaces or Eheu Fugaces. Fugaces with at the beginning.
La Bonta Annie or something comes at the end. No. It's one of these. It's a favourite classical thing about art is long and life is fleeting and time's winged chariot is running up the back of me at some speed. It means, alas, the passing years.
Absolutely right, and it's Horace again.
Posthume.
A rough translation is talking to a friend called Posthumous, who must have died after him or something. Army Posthumous, the fleeting years are slipping by Eheu, Fugaces. Frank Muir, 2 marks. Anne and Scott James, I think yours is a bit easier. Cui Bono.
Who's that going to help?
Yes. Absolutely right. This is often referred to wrongly. It doesn't mean what is the good of this. It means who is the gainer, who's going to benefit. Cui Bono. 2 marks. And we come to the last round.
So soon.
And to Denis and Frank's quotations. And the marks will be awarded on the length of the applause from the audience here in the theatre. And Denis, your quotation is, people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. I believe it comes from Barbara Streisand's song in Funny Girl.
You're much more at home with Latin cliches,
I
aren't
am.
you? Barbara Streisand. But some time ago, it must be a couple of years ago now, I provoked quite a storm of protest on this programme by mentioning in one of these stories the fact that I have a quite, admittedly, quite illogical prejudice against people who always carry their cigarette lighters in little chamois leather pouches. Now, that statement brought forth such a flood of wounded, angry letters from listeners, so that today, here and now, I would like to take this opportunity of making a public apology for having said it. Now, having made that apology, I would now like to list some of the other kinds of people against whom I have an admittedly quite illogical prejudice. For example, have you noticed that there's a kind of man, and he always seems to be the same sort of man, who, no matter when you meet him, he's always got a small piece of elastoplast around one finger. Now, why that should immediately make me want to cross him off my list of close acquaintances, I don't know, but it just does. It's like those men who keep clicking the tops of their ballpoint pens when they're talking to you. There's no harm in it. It's just a habit. Now, it's the same with those men who quite involuntarily, I'm sure, and without even being aware they're doing it, always rub one toe cap against the inside of their other trouser leg while they're waiting for the lift. I'm not for a minute implying, you see, that these people who do that are in any way untrustworthy or perverted or lacking in finer feelings or hindering the export drive or, It's just that certain people's absolutely harmless characteristics immediately lead me to categorize them quite unfairly, absolutely unjustifiably as, well, the only word that comes to mind is or aki, inside. And it's the same with assassas. Do you know what I mean by an assassa? Because they figure very high on my list of aki people. I tell you who they are. You know when you're at a wedding or some other kind of celebratory gathering, when you all get together to sing For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. Well, when you get to the line, and so say all of us, there's always a particular kind of person who chimes in, us. And so say all of us, us. Do you know, I would break an arm rather than be forced into a close acquaintanceship with an assassa. Now, I know that this is possibly beginning to make me sound more and more paranoid, but it is leading somewhere. It's leading to the kind of people who are right at the top of the charts where archiness is concerned with me, and I'll tell you who they are. They are people who go in for purple loo paper. Now, don't ask me to explain why. There's no logical explanation. It's just that all my instincts rebel so powerfully against the whole thinking behind the very concept of purple loo paper that the kind of people who go out of their way to provide themselves with it are, let me put it this way, people who need purple are the luckiest people in the world.
That story is not going to do Denis much good in Isha, and we'll pass on to Frank Muir. And if you remember, his story starts with the words, "The Girl I Left Behind Me," which I think is an 18th century song.
Isn't it?
You told me not to sing, didn't you?
I'm piddly-om-pomming. I'm not singing. Did I ever tell you about Brillat Savarin, the late 18th century French philosopher and gourmet, who once tied a knot in the bottom of one leg of a pair of policeman's trousers, or culotte de gendarme, filled it with the top of the milk, shook it, and thereby invented cullotted cream. Yes, I did. I did. But did I tell you about the time that... well, I couldn't have done because it was only last week, when my portrait was unveiled to the public in the hall of the Eheu Literary Institute. It was a terribly exciting, the whole thing, really. It was a political evening, actually, an evening put on by a local political party called the Young Don't Knows. They took a while starting, actually, because they couldn't come to any decisions at their inaugural meeting. So they decided to hold this dinner, was the one I went to. Well, it took 2 years to get the thing going. It wasn't a bad dinner to attend because they couldn't make up their minds how much to charge, so we all got in free. The meal was a bit awful. In fact, there were no vegetables at all because the Young Don't Know, who was supposed to supply the vegetables, a chap in Egham who was very proud of his kitchen garden, and in the summer he decided to freeze supplies for this big do last week. So he experimented and went into Chilvers the butcher's, and they've got one of these walk-in deep freeze rooms. So he took one of every vegetable in the garden into the room and stayed in with them all night with a torch to observe what happened when they froze. Of course, when Chilvers walked in the morning, there he was, frozen to the marrow. So we had no veg at all, just takeaway roast beef. But the best thing of this rather ghastly evening was the cabaret, because they decided to have a cabaret which would please the men, because it was mostly men, but also be suitable for the Eheu Literary Institute. So they got a girl to do a striptease, and she was tattooed with literary emblems and things. And she was called Miss High Society, but I recognised her as Hyacinth Potter from the Ironmongers. A vast girl, I might say, who's you can see sort of chucking sledgehammers around on the shelves, and divested herself, I mean literally, and it was a huge vest with buttons all up here and things. It was really a ghastly sight. This huge woman, and she'd taken everything off, and there she was tattooed with books on her front. And she had a really enormous chest, and that was A Tale of Two Cities. Actually, which was that. I thought the Decline and Fall would have been better. And then she pirouetted in a graceful action, rather like the Trans-Channel ferry, backing out and turning after leaving Dover Harbour. And on her back she had portraits tattooed, literary portraits. And they started up with Thackeray and so forth. And as you went down the spine, I got terribly excited to see that the authors, whose faces were tattooed on this huge back, tended to become local authors and more modern. And round about her vertebrae, there was Sir John Denham, who wrote Cooper's Hill, which is our local hill. And then there was suddenly Brian Forbes, Wright Lumber. And then on her behind, on the right side, John Brain. And then I saw, and oh joy, oh, bring in the music, really. The girl high left behind me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, by your vote, I find that Denis Norden wins the story, but Dilys, Powell and Frank Muir win the contest as a whole.
Taking part in My Word were Anne Scott James, Dilys Powell, Denis Norden and Frank Muir. The chairman was Jack Longland. The questions were compiled by Peter Moore, and the programme was produced by Tony Shrine.
You've been listening to My Word from the BBC.
My Word. Panel game devised by Tony Shrine and Edward J. Mason. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir challenge Anne Scott James and Denis Norden in a game about words, with Jack Longland in the chair.
And we go straight into the first round, which tests their respective vocabularies. 2 marks, if they can tell me the meaning of the following words. Frank Muir, yours is a Gallimaufry.
It's a lovely old word. This programme could be described
Yes?
as a Gallimaufry, could it not? As a kind of hash of half-remembered literature and half-digested history. It's a sort of culinary hodgepodge.
Absolutely right. It can be used either literally, that is, it is a hash or a ragout, or figuratively as a grotesque or inconsistent medley. I think we brought the U into the word. It first turns up in 1551, which is quite early for a word of that kind.
It's a good word, isn't it?
Yeah, very good word.
Gallimaufry.
Anne Scott James, your word is ouch. O-U-C-H, but it's not an exclamation, it's an ouch.
Ouch. But it's a sort of strip cartoon word, like wham.
Yes, but...
When Batman comes on and bumps his head.
You've got the indefinite
and gives an
article.
ouch.
Yeah.
So it's nothing to do with banging or hurting.
No, not at all.
You said
With
it...
apparel.
Apparel,
It's a shirt with
nouch.
the collars one size too small.
Or when you fastened your belt too tight out of vanity and you can't sort of let it out again.
That's it. What you fasten your belt with.
It's a noosh, is it?
Yes.
A brooch.
That's it.
Or a buckle.
So I'm sorry, after all that very complicated stuff, this was a French word originally called nouche, N-O-U-C-H-E, and rather like Norwich, which the English, with not much sense, turned into an orange. So they said an ouch, but it does mean buckle or brooch or the socket in which you set a precious stone. 2 marks, well earned. Denis Norden, a quango.
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it means. It's one of these dreadful modern devised words, isn't it? Quang. I would think that's what an air traffic controller would say when he gives clearance for takeoff to a Qantas aircraft.
1 mark for that straight away. But it is an acronym.
No.
It's a word made up of the initial letters of other words, like radar. If you can have a shot at it.
Well, it's what in Australia, a Qantas pilot would describe certain girls as Quango. It sounds Australian word. He's a right Quango, and it's quite uninhibited and never goes home.
1.5.
I don't know. It's a mathematical word.
No, it's a very newly coined word. It's not in any dictionary that I've been able to find. Quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organisation. Otherwise, jobs for the boys.
Really?
Oh, resign.
Dilys Powell, yours is hard to pronounce also, and I'll spell it. It's a Syzygy. S-Y-Z-Y-G-Y. Syzygy.
Anything to do with matrimony?
It could be.
It could.
What, sleeping together?
Put it back to its Greek, Dilys. You'll be able to do this.
Well, there's a very, very polite word for wife or husband, which is Syzygos, or Syzygy, perhaps. I know I'm always being caught out by it because I don't use the polite word. And I get reproached in polite society, but in lower society it's the other way around. Greeks in villages who want to say your wife always say your woman. I say no, you must say your wife. But the polite word for spouse is Syzygos, so it's a kind of matrimonial union or something.
Union is the right word. When sun, moon, and earth are in a straight line, that is the time of the full or new moon, which is what they call conjunction or opposition, and that's known in astronomical circles as Syzygy. It can be used also in mathematical senses or in prosody or the writing of verses. It's a double foot. Well, before we go on to the next round, here are the quotations you've been given for the last round of all. And Frank, yours is Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, and yours, Denis Norden, is Splendour in the Grass. Well, this next round is a round about money, and for 2 marks, in which works of literature do you find the following sums of money having significance in the unravelling of the plot? And if so, why? Beginning with Frank Muir, $1.87.
It's Mark Twain's story, the £10 million note, and it's roughly its present actual value today.
A compatriot of Mark Twain.
An American?
Who it sounds they only had Christian names.
O. Henry.
O. Henry.
It's an O. Henry short story.
Yes, it is.
Yes, well, there we are.
It's a story called The Gift to the Magi, and it is by O. Henry.
But The Gift to the Magi...
Yes, the heroine had only that amount of money to buy her husband a Christmas present, so she sold all her long hair
to buy him
a watch chain.
And he'd sold the watch chain,
the watch
to buy her a comb for the hair which she'd cut off.
Terrible.
Terrible. Beautiful story. Beautiful story.
Anne Scott James, yours is, I think, more traditional. 3,000 ducats.
Is it connected with Shylock?
Yes.
It's the money that Shylock was demanding.
Yes, before he demanded it, he...
Alternative to his pound of flesh. He was going to take the pound of flesh. He didn't get the money.
Yes, that's what I wanted. He lent it first. Absolutely right. It's in The Merchant of Venice. It was a sum borrowed from Shylock by Antonio on behalf of his rather dissolute friend Bassanio against the surety of a pound of flesh, 3,000 ducats, and 2 marks. Denis Norden, 36,000 francs. It's a bit like the first one that went to Frank.
Is it?
Just a bit.
It's not another O. Henry story. He didn't.
Yes, it's
can't be the amount that made Les Miserables miserable, because it's what he had to pay for a cup of coffee and a croissant.
You're in the right country. It's a French story.
Is it de Maupassant?
De Maupassant.
That's right. Do you remember?
Is it Le Collier by any chance?
Yes,
yes,
the necklace.
That's right.
Yes.
Do you remember what happened in this? Because it's again a rather charming and pathetic story.
The wife the wife, there's a husband and wife, and she borrowed a necklace which she then lost or it got stolen or something. And then they sort of lived in penury for several years, gathering the money to pay it back, and then found that it was only an imitation stone.
Absolutely right. Another rather pathetic, charming story, 2 marks straight away. And Dilys Powell, yours is 1,000 guilders.
1,000 guilders. Browning?
Yes.
Browning.
Well,
Pied Piper.
Miss Harriet.
yes, just explain how it comes into the story.
Well, wasn't it the reward offered by Hamlin Town in Brunswick, by famous Hanover City? The River Weser, deep and wide, washes its walls on the southern side. It's they offered 1,000 guilders if somebody would rid the town of rats.
That's right. And then they bilked him.
Yes, and so he rid the town of children as well.
All children away.
Absolutely right. Pied Piper of Hamelin, Ronald Browning, the sum promised to the piper for ridding the town of all those rats, and when they refused to pay him, he piped all the local children into a mountain cave where they were lost forever from their parents, though they may have turned up in Transylvania. 2 marks. And now we have a round of recorded poetry, and this is a team round, that is in 2 teams of 2, as it were. 2 marks. Can you tell me who was the poet and what was the poem of which the following is an excerpt? And Frank and Dilys, your bit is read by Vincent Price.
Desires and adorations, winged persuasions and veiled destinies, splendours and glooms and glimmering incarnations of hopes and fears, and twilight phantasies, and sorrow with her family of sighs, and pleasure blind with tears, led by the gleam of her own dying smile instead of eyes, came in slow pomp.
Well, what was the poem and who was the poet?
Should you try Poe?
It's a romantic, it's very romantic.
It's right plumb in the centre of the romantic tradition, yes. You can only have 2 guesses at that. There are only 2 possibles. Yes.
Try Keats.
It's about Keats.
It's about Keats. Well, we've got something.
Oh, it's by Shelley.
That's right. Remember the title? Adonais. That's right. It's Shelley's Adonais, poem written after Keats died early, and they get their 2 marks. Well, as a supplementary, Frank and Dilys, what's the connection between Percy Bysshe Shelley and Frankenstein?
Oh,
well.
Shelley had 2 huge boils, one on either side of his neck. And what happened?
His wife bit him.
That's right. And she wrote a story about him.
She wrote a story about biting him, yes.
And she was?
Yes. Oh, goodness.
Mary.
Mary, yes.
Mrs. Shelley.
Yes, she was second.
Yes, she was Mrs. Shelley. They did get married.
She wrote a story called...
Yes, she eloped with him in 1814, married him in 1816, and she was Mary Wollstonecraft, the daughter of Godwin.
She bit her husband.
2 marks. Now, Denis Norden and Anne Scott James, your excerpt is read by Sir Cedric Hardwicke.
And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts. A sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, the round ocean, the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man.
Poem and name of author, please.
But the chairman sort of put us in the century.
Yes, it's early 19th century.
Yeah. Is it Wordsworth?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
yes, dwelling is the light of setting.
That's right, something far more deeply interfused is a view of nature. If you could remember the poem, that would be even nicer.
It's not Westminster Bridge, is it?
No.
No, it's down not far from Chepstow.
Oh, Tinton Abbey.
Tinton Abbey.
Pretty good clue there. All right, 2 marks. It's William Wordsworth, lines composed a few miles above Tinton Abbey, which is round about, it's a bit farther away from Chepstow then. And you get a supplementary, Denis and Anne. Can you complete this much shorter Wordsworthian quotation? The dew was falling fast, the stars began to blink. I heard a voice, it said,
Come and have a drink. I don't know. It's minor Wordsworth.
It's minor words. I'll give it
two
one.
Voices there are.
One out of two.
Yeah.
The dew was falling fast. The stars began to blink. I heard a voice. It said, "Drink, pretty creature, drink."
Oh.
A poem to the pet lamb. One more. And now we come to the last round, to Frank and Denis's quotations. And the marks will be awarded on the length of the applause from the audience here in the theatre. Frank, your quotation was, "Between the devil and the deep blue sea," which I think is just a popular saying, and don't think it's been traced to any particular author. Frank.
It's a quandary, isn't it? And I'm caught in a quandary at the moment because I don't know what to wear tomorrow. And this is really rather important because tomorrow I've, in my capacity as Lord Rector of St Andrews University, I have one of the duties, amongst several others, is to be chairman of the University Court, which is the governing body and at St Andrews, and I don't know what to wear for it. And I'm in something of a quandary. I'm caught, between there, because I've got... well, I'll tell you what my wardrobe is. I've got what I'm wearing tonight, which, for those listeners without colour radio, it's kind of beige jacket, like an Osborne biscuit without the dimples, with sort of fawn trousers and a bow tie. And up at St Andrews, with a wisdom beyond my years, I've left 2 garments in case the weather goes wrong when I'm up there, and agrees with what the weather forecaster said, which always upsets everybody. So I've got something for very cold weather and something for very hot weather. And they're I keep them in the housemaid's cupboard at the Star Hotel there. And it's a duffel coat that I came out of the RAF with. And for warm weather, I've got a T-shirt of a revolting sort of aquamarine blue, which cost 10p. And I got that a year ago at a charity walk, which authors put on in aid of poverty-stricken publishers. And it's aquamarine blue with an even dark blue legend across the front, which said, "Proofreaders rule. OQ." So when I'm up there, I'm okay if the weather turns very cold or whether it turns very hot. And I've got the stuff I'm wearing tonight. And I've got my wardrobe of clothes, which is the usual rubbish one accumulates over the years. What I'm going to wear tomorrow is terribly important because I mustn't wear what I'm wearing tonight, because I always wear that every court meeting. And they've got a sweepstake going as to when I will change and wear something different. I happen to know that the chap who's drawn tomorrow's meeting is the university secretary. This is David Devine, who's a sterling chap. Well, he's actually a St Andrews chap, but he's a very good chap. So it's important that he wins, because the jackpot I've now learned has gone up to 88p, which may not be much after a year and a half, but the way academics are paid, it's a considerable sum in St Andrews. So I wanted to win this. So you think, okay, I wear something else. But something's gone wrong, you see, because 10 days ago I decided to clean all my wardrobe of clothes in order to select something for St Andrews. And I stuffed them onto a duffel bag to take them to the dry cleaners, and I forgot to take them. So, lateral thinking. Dry cleaning, you need something that turns round and agitates, a cement mixer. I live in Thorpe. Near us, they're building this sort of mini spaghetti junction, a sort of vermicelli junction there. M25 is going to join the M3. Rushed along there this morning, found a cement mixer untenanted, put the clothes in, nice and dry, no trouble, wouldn't be dirty by cement, put the clothes in, poured in my powder, got the thing started, and away it went, spinning round and tumbling the clothes. Stood back, everything went wrong. A huge, enormous kind of revolving lorry backed onto it. Chaps appeared, worked the wheel on my cement mixer, pointed its spout upwards till it was like a fledgling sparrow, and this huge revolving lorry extended a beak like a mother sparrow and deposited a hundredweight of wet cement on top of my clothes. Well, of course, I know, but the whole thing's now hopeless because my entire wardrobe is now a yard and a half of the M25. So you see, all I've got are the clothes I'm in. I catch the midnight. I'm at the University Court tomorrow to chair it. What to wear? All I've got is the 2 items of rubbish in the housemaid's cupboard in the Star Hotel at St Andrews. What a decision. What am I going to wear? I'm torn between the duffel and the cheap blue tea.
And now we go on to Denis Norden, and his was Splendour in the Grass, which comes again from Wordsworth and his poem Intimations of Immortality. Denis.
Field marshals, admirals of the fleet, air vice marshals and field officers of the NATO Combined Operations Joint Chief of Staffs. Honoured as I was to receive your invitation to deliver this year's lecture on neglected feats of military heroism, I must admit to some surprise at being invited. I say surprise, not just because you could have invited the Lord Rector, but because the only other time that I've ever found myself summoned to the presence of so many high-ranking officers was during the last war. It was some 10 minutes or so after General Blood and Guts Patton had fallen into one of the latrine trenches I'd been digging. That sharply etched memory, however, only spurred my determination to find a suitable, neglected feat of military heroism for you. And to that end, I set myself the task of reading through the entire section labelled Military History in my local library. Now, this fortunately did not take as long as I had feared, because all the section turned out to consist of was a copy of The Wooden Horse and something called Bawdy Barrack Room Ballads. Happily, though, the title of Mr. Williams' excellent escape story did yield me my subject, because the neglected feat of military heroism I would like to recall to you today is the one that took place inside the original wooden horse, the one by which the ancient Greeks gained final victory in their altercation with the Trojans. You see, although the employment of this novel instrument of war has frequently been acclaimed in song and story, the people to whom no tribute has ever been paid are the actual Greek soldiers who had the job of sitting inside that wooden horse for 3 days. Let me try, therefore, in this short lecture, to call on my own service experiences to try and reconstruct their agonizing ordeal. First, their non-commissioned officer would have had to brief them. This platoon has been chose for the honor of pulling off a stroke that could finally end this 10 years of war and return us all to our wives and loved ones, or both. So, let me show you the stroke that I have mentioned. All right, Corporal, whip them dust sheets off it, and there it is. Oh, stone me. What is it, Sarge? What do you mean, what is it, Sarge? If you wore your helmet straight, Epidaurus, you would see what it is. That is an horse. And they are going to call it the Horse of Troy. Horse of Troy? The Horse of Troy. What is going to be filled with something. And you know what that wooden horse is going to be filled with, Epidaurus? He's going to be filled with you. All of you. So on a command, enter horse. I want to see you filing in there in alpha, beta order. And I want you to sit inside within there until further orders. Oh, wait a minute, Sarge, how? I mean, where do we enter it? I mean, do we get in, like, through the mouth? No, you do not get in through the mouth. Well, where then? Hey, Sarge, you're not going... No, we are not. You will enter through the trapdoor what has been cut in its midriff. Now, no more from you, Epidaurus. I'll be up in front of the colonel before you can say Agamemnon. And that, gentlemen, was the start of their heroic ordeal. And what history has neglected to record is what it must have been like under that broiling Trojan sun for 20 men to sit cooped up for 3 days within a wooden equine construction. Hey, Sarge, shh! Keep the voice down. You want the Trojans to tumble us? What is it? It's Epidaurus, Sarge. What about Epidaurus? He's got one of his tummies. Oh, no. Oh, God, no, not in here. Hang on, Epidaurus. Attention, everybody. Can I have your attention, please? Is there a doctor in the horse? Try and picture it, gentlemen. Discomfort, heat, hunger, thirst, enforced silence, absolutely no ablutions facilities or naffy wagon. And they were not the only privations suffered by this gallant band during their 72-hour incarceration, because it would ill behove me to conclude this tribute without making mention of the worst agony they had to endure, the one that no historian has taken note of. Because what has always been forgotten, gentlemen, is this. They were Greek soldiers. And everybody knows what uniforms Greek soldiers wear. That short, flimsy, white skirt. Now, if you'll just remember that the seats on which they were obliged to sit all that time were made of wood. Well, gentlemen, if you can imagine your own practically bare flesh shifting about on rough, unpolished wood for 3 days, well, gentlemen, your private and ever-present agony is not going to be Wordsworth's splendour in the grass. It's going to be splinter. Thank you, gentlemen. You may stand.
Well, by your vote, ladies and gentlemen, Denis Norden wins the story, but Dilys, Powell and Frank Muir win this week's contest. Thank you very much.
Taking part in My Word were Anne Scott James, Dilys Powell, Denis Norden and Frank Muir. The chairman was Jack Longland. The questions were compiled by Peter Moore, and the programme was produced by Tony Shrine.
You've been listening to My Word from the BBC, heard each week at this time.
My Word. Panel game devised by Tony Shrine and Edward J. Mason. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir challenge Anne Scott James and Denis Norden in a game about words, with Jack Longland in the chair.
And we go straight into the first round, which tests their respective vocabularies. So for 2 marks, what's the meaning of these words? Denis Norden begins. Denis, yours is an ecdysiast.
I always thought it was ecdysias.
It may well be.
Oh, it may be, yes. I don't know. I've never said it actually out loud, but it's a word much loved of a trade magazine called Variety. I believe it was coined by H.L. Mencken.
Yes.
And he used it to describe a striptease dancer, yes.
Absolutely.
And I think somewhere he said, as ye show, so shall we peep.
And let me correct myself, because I'm sure Denis is right, and it ought to be ecdysias. Looking at the words it's supposed to come from in Greek, it must be dysias, not dysias, I'm sorry. And in fact, it's a very scientific term in biology, meaning the act of casting off an integument, just as a snake does when it loses its skin once a year. And the striptease one does it twice nightly rather than once a year. Two more.
We used to stand at the back of the windmill shouting, "Cast off your integument."
Now it's Dilys Powell's turn. Dilys, yours is a droop, only spelt D-R-U-P-E, droop.
Droop?
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of it.
It's a disease of chickens.
No, it's more to do with whatever branch of horticulture it is which produces orchards.
Horticulture? It's a disease of apples.
No, it isn't a disease at all.
Not a disease. It's a gift of apples.
Apple is about the only thing it isn't.
It's
squashy food.
Squashy, but what has it got in the middle?
Melon doesn't have a stone in the middle.
Pit.
Has a pit in the middle.
It's something to do with the
you
inside, the
one
hard
and
inside.
a half.
You've been doing so terribly badly, I'm going to give you half a mark. It's a stone fruit. That is a fruit that has a stone in it, or a nut that has a kernel, like the plum or the cherry, or if you prefer it, the olive. Did you say plum at one stage?
I said plum.
Oh, well, put you up.
Didn't I say plum?
Put you up to 1 mark. It came in a list including melons and oranges. 1 out of 2. Frank Muir.
So the Boer's droop is the hard centre of a hop.
That's right. Yes. Well done. Frank, yours is an embranglement.
It's what happened, presumably, when some original creator of words got tangled in a bramble.
Yes. Not a bad idea.
Well, it's an entanglement, isn't
Yes,
it?
that's right. Yep.
I was embranglement sounds like the translation of imbroglio.
It is. But among bell ringers, it has a special meaning, that is, the campanological imbroglio caused by one ringer ringing out of turn, in which case the whole blooming shoot goes totally wrong. But embranglement, as Frank is quite right in saying, it's a disastrous confusion or entanglement, and it's probably a mixture between brawl and wrangle. At least that's what the dictionaries think. Embranglement.
I used to be a bell ringer.
Did you often get
when I was young,
embrangled?
in my teens? No, you can't. With change ringing, where the chief bell ringer calls the changes,
yes.
You might get out of a step occasionally, but it doesn't mean tangled ropes and things like that.
No, but it does mean tangled tunes.
Well, they all sound a bit tangled.
Anyway, you got your 2 marks.
With change ringing.
Anne Scott James, your word is a nuncheon, like luncheon, but with N instead of L.
No, I think it's when people say, oh, I never touch lunch, I just have a salad. And they have a stuffed avocado pear with prawns, followed by roast pork, followed by banana souffle. And that's a sort of a nuncheon.
Yes, I think you're slightly overdoing it.
I am. Well, is it a light form of lunch?
I think that's right. It's a light refreshment, can be taken between meals. Originally, it meant a noon drink, which is a very useful
thing to have. Do you know, Dilys always sustains herself before she comes here with a packet of digestive biscuits. Would that be a nuncheon or no? It's the wrong time of day.
It's the wrong time of day. It isn't liquid enough. And
but there's also
that enters into it. We don't let us sit there munching dry biscuits.
No.
Suggestive biscuits.
There's a bit in Browning's Piper. So munch on, crunch on, take your nunch on, breakfast, supper, dinner, luncheon. So apparently it was distinguished from the other meals and was a light snack liquid between meals.
Yes, it was.
Is that right?
Yes,
No.
I remember it. Yeah, it's 18th century.
Yes. Okay, 2 marks. Well, before we go on to the next round, here are the quotations you've been given for the last round of all. And Denis, your quotation is, "He who hesitates is lost." And yours, Frank, is, "Dirty British coaster with a salt-caked smokestack." Second round is a round of origins and derivations, and for 2 marks, how did the following words or phrases originate, or from what did they come or derive? Denis Norden, your phrase is, "to bat an eyelid."
Well, that's generally used in the negative sense, only, isn't it? He didn't bat an eyelid.
Yes.
Yes, I told him that, and he batted an eyelid. You know? Fun, isn't it? It's only... I don't know. To bat. Is it...
Don't you think there's a very degenerate, not Mickey Mouse, but general cartoons where everybody flaps their eyelids and eyes up and down?
Yeah. Well, it could be like a... If you do it sort of... It goes up and down silently, like a bat's wing.
The wing is quite accurate, Denis. Can you think of a time when the sports included birds that batted their wings?
Sports included birds that batted their wings.
I can only think of
No,
hawks
we don't.
that
Yes.
wouldn't have anything to do with it. Hawking?
Yeah.
Hawking, is it?
Oh.
Absolutely right.
Oh.
A little bit of help there, I think.
Oh, not much, not much. Oh, now you put the ye Jessie over ye... ye hoodie, over
Yes, I know you do.
over ye Hawkie's eyelids, and it's so tight you can't bat them.
And you get 1.5 marks.
Oh.
It's the falconer's vocabulary. Batting with a hawk meant it fluttered with its wings, either when it was doing it on the perch or when it was on your fist, before you sort of loosed it into the air. So a batted eyelid is a fluttered eyelid, just like the hawk's wings, 1.5. Dilys Powell, the coccyx, C-O-C-C-Y-X. I always mispronounce this, but it is called coccyx.
It means the end of something.
It doesn't. It
The
means
final bone.
It's the base of the spine.
I see. Well, we never mention it in these surroundings.
Well, you're jolly lucky if you never get a
Never
pain in
mention
yours,
it.
is all I can say.
It's a little bony
It's a bit.
extremity.
It's a bit the end of us all.
it's what you're sitting on.
Am I?
Yes.
Well, we never mentioned that. I mean, really, all
Well,
right.
why is it called that?
Because it's my bottom.
That doesn't help much. The coccyx is anatomically the terminal triangular bone of your vertebral column, if you have one, as most of us have. But it's the Greek for cuckoo. Because, oh yes, coccyx. To early anatomists, this particular bone was called os coccygeus because the shape of the bone was said to be like the bill of a cuckoo. Frank Muir, 19 to the dozen.
Well, it means to speak very rapidly.
Yes?
It's, in other words, it's somebody who crams 19 words in, where most normal talkers could only manage 12.
I'm going to give you 2 marks, but that isn't the explanation I got in front of me, and I've been trying to do a bit of looking up because I knew Frank would come back at me if I didn't. So I'm going to give him his marks, but I am told, on scientific authority, that it was the acceptable standard of efficiency for Watt's steam-powered pumps, which were used in Cornish tin mines in the 1770s, and the standard was that each pump should raise 19,000 gallons of water for every 12 bushels of coal.
Rubbish! Rubbish!
Rubbish!
Rubbish!
Actually, by that argument, the phrase should be 19,000 to
That's
the
right,
dozen.
exactly.
You don't know what's what.
You'll understand, Adrian, why I got my bit in first. And now, Anne Scott James. To be in cahoots with, C-A-H-O-O-T-S, to be in cahoots with.
Well, it means you're very chummy with.
Yes?
Probably up to no good with somebody, I should think, too. Going in for a bit of slush.
Yes. But origin.
Origin. Is it Indian word?
Red Indian, yeah.
Red Indian, I mean.
Well, French, what is now the United States, but probably Louisiana or somewhere like that. Yes.
Oh, yes, I see. So do we have to think of the French language? I mean, en something or other?
Yes,
or
it
not?
would
That
help.
will help, will
It would help.
En...
Caroon.
Yeah.
Avec. Which is very well known. It means arm in arm with.
Well, it does mean that.
It's like we used to be. We've got the the avec, right? I bet.
Yes, there are two plausible explanations here again, but they are more plausible than the last one.
Let's think of a French word beginning with C. That's all we need.
Well, try C-A-H-U-T-E, which is a word which is not at all familiar to me. You might possibly know it.
No. My friend Jane Duff.
Cahoot.
Oh, cahoot. Oh, I think it's a rather immoral word for a close sexual embrace.
You think all French words are immoral?
I'll give you 1.5 for getting jolly close. Two explanations. The first is it's the French word cohorte, C-H-O-H-O-R-T-E. That is a company or partnership. But the perhaps more likely one is a French dialect word, cahoot, which means a hut or cabin. So everything you've said, Anne, is probably true. But I can't give you more than 1.5 marks. Well, now we have a round of double definitions, and for 2 marks, what in one single word can be defined by both the following definitions? Denis Norden, your two are deceptive humbug and the lower piece of a flitch of bacon. One word covering both.
Deceptive humbug. You mean that the abstract word? You don't mean a peppermint sort? No.
One is
gammon.
Yes,
gammon.
Gammon is right.
Yeah.
It's the ham of a hog, now usually with adjacent parts of the side, whatever that may mean, but housewives will understand. And deceptive humbug, gammon, is usually, I think, your accomplice in the 3-card trick of something of that sort, Denis, where you keep on chattering while the...
No, gammon is what you say. It's gammon and
spinach.
Spinach, it's rubbish. Actually, ham would have done it.
Ham would have done it.
Wouldn't it? Ham, a kind of ham actor, deceptive humbug.
Yes, that's fine. Fair enough. 2 marks. Dilys Powell, your two, leading to the same word, are on the one side a drop, splash, or spot, and on the other, a paroxysmal affliction of the big toe.
Gout or gout?
Gout. They used to think that gout was caused by what Frank is very clever on, the humours in the 17th century. It dripped, drip by drip, down into your big toe and caused most terrible pains. So gout covers both. 2 marks. Frank Muir, your one is an oarsman's bench, or to frustrate or obstruct.
Wet blanket.
You're thinking of dry bob or something, I'm not certain.
Well, it could be the same.
Or a rower's bench, whatever you like to call it, a rower's bench, and to frustrate or obstruct, or to balk.
To balk, that's timber. Pine.
No, I don't think so.
Both can do.
Think of where you sit in a rather large boat and you are not strong enough and your oars are not long enough.
In the bar. Bar. Bar is to obstruct, or to, and bar is where you sit when you row, don't you? Yes, 1 mark, next round.
I have done my turn.
You sit on a bar when you're rowing, you're going to be extremely uncomfortable when you get up. No, what runs across a boat?
Well, rats.
Dilys, yes, go on.
A thought.
You've got it. You won't get more than 1.5, because I did give a fair amount of help. Thwart, which is the crossways rower's bench that you sit on when you're rowing. And to thwart is to frustrate or obstruct. Yes, that's why I said a rather big boat. You don't have it in a rowing 8. It's something rather more complicated. 1.5. Anne Scott James. A piece of ordnance, O-R-D-N-A-N-C, a piece of ordnance, and a collision of billiard balls.
A pot. A break.
No.
What else you've got?
Piece of
cannon. Cannon off the
Cannon, that's
Cush.
got it. Well done.
Cannon, it is. 2 marks.
I always thought it'd be a lovely title for a cleric who roved like Eric Newby over the northwest frontier to name his autobiography A Cannon Off the Cush.
You'll have to write that one yourself, I think, Frank. Well, now we come to the last round and to Denis and Frank's quotations and stories. And the marks will be awarded on the length of applause from the audience here in the theatre. And Denis, your quotation is, "He who hesitates is lost," which is, I think, a proverb. Denis?
Well, you may not believe this, but when I was about 16 and a half, if you'd have asked me what was my greatest ambition, I'd have said to have a big exclamation mark in my diary. And what made that fact all the more remarkable was that at the time, I didn't even know what that exclamation mark was supposed to signify. You see, all I knew was that one Monday morning, after the beginning of that term at school, a friend of mine called Snitch Corman came into the classroom, beckoned some of us over, looked round furtively, then opened his diary at the page for the preceding Saturday, and there, in red ink, was written 10:45 p.m., followed by a big red exclamation mark. Weedy Forbes said, "Caw." We used to call him Weedy because he was so painfully skinny that he could climb into a turtleneck sweater from either end. And he said, "Caw, Snitch, that makes you the first in the class, the first one in the whole class." And Snitch just sort of smirked. But I noticed that when he moved over to his desk, his walk had acquired a very definite swagger. The following Monday, it was Puffy Layton's turn. He came in. "I'm second," he said. He was "I'm second in the class." And there, in his hobbies diary, prefaced by the words 9:15 p.m., inside unlit telephone box, was another big triumphant exclamation mark. And then over the following week, one after the other of my classmates entered, brandishing their diaries and shouting, "I'm third, I'm fourth in the class, I'm fifth," until finally, and only because of the aid that was offered by some rather more specific detail in Wally Beckman's 15th place entry in his diary, did I then begin to realize that not only was there some kind of masculine status contest in progress, but that it involved girls. Moreover, unless I got going on acquiring an exclamation mark, Weedy Forbes and I would soon be dead heating for last place. Which is why I immediately rang up Bessie Arkwright. Now, let me tell you about Bessie. She and I had met under what would today be considered unusual circumstances. We'd been introduced. She was actually the cousin of the girl who ultimately became Snitch's exclamation mark. And although Bessie, although she wasn't much to look at, in fact, she was rather built on the foreign car principle, you know, most of the weight in the boot. Now, don't get me wrong, she was a very nice girl, interesting to talk to, and I respected her, but so far in our relationship, although there was definitely chemistry between us, there had been absolutely no suggestion of biology. However, as the school term now only had about 10 days to run, if I was going in for the exclamation mark, she was the only material that I had on hand to work with. So that Saturday night, straight after the film, which she didn't actually see because she had some trouble getting her glasses on over her false eyelashes, I took her to the local milk bar. I plied her with double strawberry shakes. Then I hurried her back to her home before my scented cashews wore off. Now, once in her front room, I said, Bessie, come and sit on my lap." She said, "All right then," and she dropped into my lap. Now, another thing that young fellows of that time believed was that girls judged you by the number of keys you had on your key ring. So, bearing that in mind, and also remembering that Bessie's shape was such that if she'd have been Miss Muffet, she would have required 2 tuffets, I don't think I need go into any detailed description of what happens to a chap with a bunch of keys in his trouser pocket when a girl of Bessie's build drops into his lap. Suffice it to say that in the exclamation mark race, I was forced to retire hurt. In fact, 3 chaps from the junior school got to the finishing line before I did. That's why I still remember the words that Snitch wrote on his Get Well card. What it said was, "He who Bessie dates is last."
I thought it was the most ungallant story. As we pass on rapidly to Frank Muir, if you remember, his quotation was, "Dirty British coaster with a salt-caked smokestack," which is from John Masefield, a poem called Cargoes. Frank.
How did John Masefield write that line? I mean, what is the impulse? Where does the inspiration come? Does it come from inside the poet? Well, not necessarily. It can come from outside. It can be something that somebody says to a poet. There's a cadence or an arrangement of words or rhythm which strikes home. Shakespeare, for instance. I mean, in the 16th century, late, Shakespeare was desperately trying to write a sonnet. And the main season had finished, and it was during the summer, and normally the Lord Chamberlain's company went on tour. And they did a kind of excerpts from various plays, and it was sort of compared by Di Evans, a Welsh actor who played the comedian's parts. And this day, the tour was just coming up, and Shakespeare was sitting there trying to think of a theme, of an opening line for his sonnet. And Will Kemp, the actor, came up to him and said, "William, what am I going to do when we go out, around the sticks? What's my function?" And Shakespeare says, "Do what?" Because he was busy. And Will Kemp said, "Shall I compare the tour, same as Di?" And immediately, you see, the inspiration comes. And the same thing happened with John Masefield. And through his wife, who was a constant source of inspiration for him, because he wanted a poem to finish his book of sea poems, and he couldn't even think of a title. And he had a little Austin 7, this was about sort of 1930, and they had to go down shopping, and he went and cranked the handle, and nothing happened. So he retired to his study to try and think of a title for his poems. His wife, meanwhile, went down, adjusted the advance and retard on the steering wheel of the Austin 7, gave one lift of the handle, and away she went. And she went upstairs and knocked on the door, and he said, "Now what?" And she said, skittishly, "Cargoes." He thought, what a marvellous title for a poem. But the actual key line of the poem, he just could not get. But in the town, they were at Broadstairs at the time, and they were filming in 1930 one of the first British musicals. And Gilly was playing the lead, and he'd been imported, and there was and starring with him was Lottie Lucas, who was a kind of ingenue girl of the period, a sort of gin and it girl, and she had to sing with Gilly, Gilly, da 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 dee, da da da. And in this scene that they were shooting that morning, she wore a smock. She was a peasant, and she'd fallen in love with this Breton sailor played by Gilly. And gazing coquettishly over her shoulder, she caught her foot in a rope and fell into the harbour. Well, there's no particular problem. She wouldn't drown. She was soaking wet. And they had a little sort of donkey engine and basket for hauling the fish up from the harbour, so they pushed her into that, and the donkey engine chuffed away. But a heavy peasant smock full of seawater is immensely heavy, much more than fish, and halfway up the donkey engine jammed, and she was absolutely stuck. But a local photographer took a picture of this, and it appeared in the Morning Post. And the following morning, Mrs. John Masefield said to her husband, "Look at this. Oh, isn't this amusing?" And he said, what is it? She said, "It's a lovely photograph of this poor girl in the film." And he said, "Don't show me the photograph. What does it say?" And then she said it. She said, "It says, dotty British co-star with a salt-caked smock stuck."
I didn't see how Frank could possibly get out of that one, but he did. And by your vote, ladies and gentlemen, he wins, Frank Muir wins the story, but on the other side, Denis Norden and Scott James win this week's contest.
Taking part in My Word were Anne Scott James, Dilys Powell, Denis Norden and Frank Muir. The chairman was Jack Longland. The questions were compiled by Peter Moore and the programme was produced by Tony Shrine. My Word. Panel game devised by Tony Shrine and Edward J. Mason. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir challenge Anne Scott James and Denis Norden in a game about words, with Jack Longland in the chair.
And we go straight into the first round, which tests their respective vocabularies. So for 2 marks, what's the meaning of the following word? And Frank Muir, you begin with a furbelow.
Means almost what it sounds like.
That's right.
Fur below. Except it needn't necessarily be fur. It's a kind of frivolous decoration to the petticoat.
Yes. Yes.
Flouncers and furbelows. And also, it's faintly derogatory, isn't it?
It is, particularly if used in the plural. And a lot of sort of showy ornaments, rather too many that you ought not to have. And you're absolutely right, Frank, 2 marks. A pleated border at the hem of a petticoat, as Frank says, or skirt, a sartorial trimming, and much too showy in the plural, and it's also a kind of seaweed, but you do not have to wear that at all. 2 marks. And Scott James. Now, this is difficult because there are 2 ways of pronouncing it, and I'll try both. It's a behemoth, B-E-H-E-M-O-T-H, or a behemoth, spelt the same way.
I'll settle for behemoth, Jack. It's a biblical, Old Testament word.
Yes.
Meaning something large, I think, and alarming. An animal.
Yes. It's
a hairy mammal.
It comes in the book of Job. I think it's normally taken to be the hippopotamus, which they hadn't met very often. It was a bit alarming to meet a hippopotamus for the first time, because it comes from an Egyptian word meaning the water ox, which is not a bad description of a hippopotamus which otherwise eats weeds and grass. And it can be anything which is enormous in size. You're not quite certain what it is. You've met it in a nightmare. 2 marks. Denis Norden, yours is quite different. Schadenfreude.
Oh, we're doing German words. Well, it's... I think it's more as a literary term more than anything else. A German word meaning damage joy.
Yes,
and it's
yep.
It's one of the reasons that certain people advance for why we laugh.
That's Clement Freude.
It means the I think actually it's the reason, it's the only reason why we laugh. It's the pleasure that we take from seeing somebody else's misfortune. If for example, you saw a chap jump on a bicycle without noticing that somebody had removed the saddle. That rather pleasant sensation that's aroused within you. That's called Schadenfreude.
If this saddle had just been loose, it would have been Lucian Freud.
Before we got through the whole Freud family, let me say that Denis's description and examples were absolutely perfect, and he gets his 2 marks. Now, Dilys Powell, your word is gnomic.
I think it's something to do with knowing.
Yes?
It's being rather obscurely knowing, rather sort of
Yes.
learnedly knowing.
And what are you trying to do?
Divine, I think. It's kind of... it has a relation to the divine, hasn't it?
It might do.
Yes, yes. Yes, hasn't it?
It's an instruction,
Of course it has.
It's more like an instruction. I'm going to give you 1.5.
It's a message.
No.
It's a message downwards, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It's sententious would be one description of it. Something consisting of general maxims or aphorisms or what you think are moral truths. And you're trying to express some great truth in a very small number of extremely well-chosen words. And because there's a thing called the gnomic aorist, which, if you take an example, men were deceivers ever, which means they're still going on being deceivers now. But I think 1.5 would be a fair mark.
Or do not use while the train is standing at the station.
That's right. That's right. It's an even better example from Frank.
Do you remember the magazine John Bull used to do a competition called Bullets, in which you had to sort of write a whole picture in about 4 words? They were the most gnomic things I ever remember.
Yes, that's the point one that did come out, that it's as short and pithy as possible. Now, before we go on to the next round, here are the quotations you've been given for the last round of all, and Frank, yours is "Too many cooks spoil the broth," and yours, Denis, is "There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip." But now a round of wise words about wit itself. So for 2 marks, can you identify the author of the following allegedly witty definitions? Beginning with Frank Muir again. He was a chronic sufferer from vertigo and said that wit in conversation is, in the midwife's phrase, a quick conception and an easy delivery.
It's a good line, isn't it? Very good.
He also said, "A nice man is a man of nasty ideas."
That's Swift.
A rather clue.
That kind of line suited Swift's wit.
Now, what am I to give Frank?
None.
1. 1. Now, it's Scott James. An acknowledged master, which you can put into inverted commas if you prefer it, he said that wit ought to be a glorious treat like caviar and not spread about like marmalade.
Master in inverted commas?
Would it be the master?
The master?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, Noel Coward, yes.
2 marks, Noel Coward it was, and he was known among some people as the master. Denis Norden, your turn now. An American autocrat of the breakfast table, he said that the wit knows that his place is at the tail of the procession.
I haven't the faintest idea what the quotation means, but the autocrat of the breakfast table was Oliver Wendell Holmes.
That was a good clue, I thought. 2 marks. Denis Powell, your turn. With a name sounding like a sneeze, this German philosopher said that wit was the epitaph of an emotion.
All German philosophers sound like a sneeze.
Do I have sneezed? I mean...
You needn't, you just...
Sneezed. No. Nietzsche?
Yes, that was the philosopher Nietzsche, and he said that wit was the epitaph of an emotion. Well, now let's get on to something quite different, because it is a round of differences. For 2 marks, what's the difference in meaning between the following 2 words, beginning again with Frank Muir, and your 2 are, Frank, and they're most inappropriate, rotund and orotund.
In the early 18th century, James Thomson described a rich little cleric of the time as a little, round, oily man of God. Now, the little, round, oily man of God would have looked rotund, and his sermons would have been orotund.
I think that would do rather nicely. 2 marks. And Scott James, your two are sympathy and empathy.
Sympathy means when you feel alongside or with another person.
Yes.
And what's empathy? A pain in your middle, I think.
No, I think sympathy is when you understand what a person's feeling, and empathy is when you actually are capable of experiencing the same emotion yourself. I think when husbands, when wives are going to have babies and the husbands get pains, that's empathizing, whereas sympathizing is when they say, "Shouldn't you sit down, dear?"
But just before you sit down, would you mind handing me my boots?
Would you mind? No.
Horse that trunk over there and push the table right.
That's right.
2 marks straight away. Denis Norden, pathos and bathos.
And D'Artagnan. Pathos is a kind of a literary or theatrical device by which you excite or inspire pity.
Yes.
And bathos is a kind of failed pathos. The example of bathos I remember, I think it's in Three Men in a Boat, where Jerome says, "But we did not sail into a world of golden sunset. We went smack into an old lady in a punt."
That'll do. 2 marks straight away. Now, Dilys Powell, your two, are prolixity and verbosity. Prolixity and verbosity.
Well, they both mean talking a great deal.
Yes.
I think prolixity means talking too much, really. Verbosity was referred to by Disraeli. Exuberance of his own verbosity.
Yes.
Yes. He spoke too much in public. Prolixity, I think, rather going on too long.
Prolixity in literature and also in speech means you keep on dwelling on detail far too much. You're telling a story and you put in the colour of the 15th person in the back row, put in the colour of their hair.
You have to in radio.
Whereas verbosity simply means too many words anyway. There is a slight difference, though not a great one. Well, now we have a quick round entitled New Similes for Old. So for 2 marks, can you suggest a newer and more up-to-date version of the following perhaps rather overworked similes? So Frank Muir, what would you suggest instead of as cool as a cucumber?
It would be nice to have another food simile, but the only one I can think of is as cool as a peppermint after curry. But I think as cool as clean sheets.
That's nice. I think that would do rather nicely. 2 marks. And Scott James, instead of as poor as a church mouse.
As poor as a church mouse. As poor as an orphan in the third world. Let's be serious for once.
Yeah, 2 marks straight away in that case. Denis, instead of as slippery as an eel, as slippery as what?
As slippery as cold boiled spaghetti eaten with chopsticks.
Can't catch that. Dilys Powell, yours, instead of as nervous as a kitten, as nervous as?
As nervous as the Chancellor about to announce his mini-budget.
So now we come to the last round, and to Frank and Denis's quotations, and the marks will be awarded on the length of the applause from the audience here in the theatre. And Frank, your quotation is, "Too many cooks spoil the broth," which I think is a proverb. And Frank, what are you going to do with that proverb?
Herewith, the complete and utter history of Scotland. And in order to persuade our overseas listeners who might be coming to England to visit Scotland, I want to tell them the whole history of Scotland. I've researched it in depth. Well, not really in depth, because I researched it last Tuesday morning at the Literary Institute in Egham. But I didn't take a notebook, and all I had to write down the facts was the back of a parking fine notification. Scotland is, if you look at a map and take Britain as a chap in a very large hat riding a pig westward, Scotland is the head of Britain, down to the Adam's apple. And then you get Northumberland, you see. It's very ancient. Religion came to Scotland really quite early on from Ireland. The monks sailed round and tried to establish religion in England on the island of Lindisfarne, but it didn't take, and they ended up as a pop group. And they had more success in Scotland on the Isle of Iona, and one of the original foundations of religion in Scotland was St Andrews, and it was, the university was founded there. It was the cathedral city at the beginning of the 15th century. In medieval times in Scotland, the youth of the town used to engage into warring factions every Saturday afternoon, and used to fight. They were the Celtics and the Rangers, and their fighting often went on way into the evening. Historians remember that as the Wars of the Razors. Edinburgh, too, was another city, which is now the capital city, which was famous for the festival, and Edinburgh Rock, which isn't like Blackpool Rock. And when you bite it, it sort of crumbles in a sort of rather oddly disturbing powdery way, as though a very old wisdom tooth has at last gone. Life in the Highlands was even tougher than life in the Lowlands, and typical Scots dress was a simple kilt. And if you're worried what a Highlander wore beneath his kilt, well, I can tell you that any self-respecting Highlander did, and still does, wear beneath his kilt socks and then shoes. To keep themselves warm at night on the Highlands, they used to dip their plaid, which is a kind of shoulder blanket, into water, wring it out, and roll up, and that kept them warm all night. They dip into any convenient burn, Scottish word for stream, and that kept them warm. Now, these Highland warriors were so tough that this lot, who used to go through this practice of dipping their plaid in water, were the nucleus of the now famous Coldstream Guards. Highland games they also played, and these reached their zenith in Victorian times, when at Braemar, when Queen Victoria and many of her cabinet ministers used to come up and watch them. And there the famous game was tossing the caber, in which a very powerful Scot would pick up a telegraph pole, some 40 feet in length, run with it as long as he was able, and then toss it high in the air, the aim being that it fell on the head of the English Minister for Scottish Affairs. Scotland stopped the death penalty for any other than the most awful crimes in 1794, and the last public execution was at Anstruther in 1804, when Sandy Sanderson was beheaded for whistling on Sunday. By far the prettiest part of Scotland are the fishing towns and villages on the east coast of the Kingdom of Fife and of Angus, and the prettiest of all of these is St Andrews. Now, it has been said that Arbroath is prettier, but some people say this isn't so because of the religious revival in the 19th century, when there are so many Scottish churches. There was the Church of Scotland, there was the United Free, the Free Church, there were the evangelist churches. Instead of building just one kirk on the hill. Each of these sects built 4 churches each on every street corner. Hence this, I think, rather sort of unfair but old Scottish proverb about the town. Too many kirks spoil Arbroath.
Frank will need a bodyguard next time he goes north of the border. But now let's see how you get on, Denis, with your quotation, which was, "There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip." Denis?
So, what's the break? I'm sorry. I do apologise. I did it again. I went right off there. As fast asleep. Isn't it awful? It's happening every week now. While Frank's telling his story, I find my lids getting heavier and heavier, and then my eyes get that sort of double glazing, and before I know it, I'm gone. What I must explain, though, is it's absolutely no reflection on Frank or the astonishingly amusing stories that he tells. It's simply the consequence of my chronic insomnia. I've always slept badly, but lately it's just getting impossible. Night after night, I just lie there. I don't know if any of you suffer from insomnia. But you know what I find the worst part about it? It's those extraordinary thoughts that come into your head. You find yourself worrying about the most ridiculous things, like, how did Adam keep his fig leaf on? or what do you call a male ladybird? Why do you never hear of anybody catching their death of hot? Or if all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, where do audiences come from? You see, and that sort of totally futile speculation just goes sort of tumble-drying round in the brain, and or the next thing you know, it's suddenly light, and there's that sort of clink, clink, feelings, whoa, it's the milkman. And all you know is it's another night, and the only certainty that you get is that you're going to spend the next 16 hours just flopping about like a limp rag, because all that medical science really knows about sleep, the phenomenon called sleep, is that it's something which, if you don't get any the night before, you spend the whole of the next day half-a. Right? What's more, anybody like me who has real insomnia knows better than to put any faith at all in all those cures that people keep recommending to you. Like, try blotting out the light by wearing one of those sleep masks. Well, I tried that. You can't say I didn't try it. I put one on. It's like a kind of elasticated blindfold, and 2 things happened. The first one was about 5 a.m. I got very thirsty, so I fumbled for the glass of water on my bedside table, took a sip, went to put it back, and poured the whole lot over myself. And 2 hours later, my little godson, who was staying with us, wandered in, took one look at me, and then went rushing back to his mother, shouting, you're wrong, I've just seen Batman, and he does wet the bed." Or take that other well-known last resort, sleeping pills. It's another dead loss, absolute dead loss. You know, all sleeping pills nowadays come in those special bottles that children can't open. I can't open them either. all that bottle of pills did for me was I had to struggle so hard to get the top off, I finally fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. And even that didn't help, because even when I did sleep, I dreamt I was awake. You get that? You see, but as a consequence of all that, this intensely humiliating development has taken place. You see, because of the long friendship that's existed between Frank and myself, his voice has now become the only sound in the world that I find reassuring enough to lull me to sleep, you see. So, in other words, Frank's story now provides the only decent kip I get all week. Well, even worse than that, if it wasn't for an arrangement that Miss Scott James and myself have come to, I'd probably still be sleeping when they're playing the closing signature tune, you see, but what we have agreed, Anne and I have agreed, is the moment the studio audience begins its storm of applause for Frank's brilliant punchline, she drops her hand, you see, beneath the table, and between her well-manicured forefinger and thumbnail, she gives me a short, sharp nip on the thigh, you see, which wakes me up in time to start my dissertation, you see. But today, unfortunately, as you all witnessed, it would appear that I was sitting a little bit too far away for her nails to reach my thigh. Mind you, that still wasn't as embarrassing as the time I sat myself a little too close. But just in case I ever happen to oversleep again on this program, perhaps the listeners will now appreciate what goes on this side of the microphone during Frank's applause. There's many a kip twixt the clap and the nip.
And by your vote, ladies and gentlemen, Denis Norden wins the story, and he and Anne Scott James also win this entire contest this week.
Taking part in My Word were Anne Scott James, Dilys Powell, Denis Norden and Frank Muir. The chairman was Jack Longland. The questions were compiled by Peter Moore, and the programme was produced by Tony Shrine.